Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. You still there, Gyro? Quiet.
Alright, so the time has come to fish out my good old Baofeng. In fact, I've got several of these, and I have a giant battery for one. Giant battery's up here charging, not sure if it's going to work out. But I had a problem with this in that the volume control wasn't working very well. Switch to FM radio here, we can probably do that. It wasn't quite working right. The solution was to give this a good scrub. I've got a couple more, I'll see if they do the same thing. And here's a couple more of these, and we'll whack a battery on. This is one of the camo batteries. No, that one's apparently flat. Let's try this one. These probably all need cleaning and stuff. They've been in storage a long time. Alright, we'll find out what's up with that one in a minute. Let's whack this one on. See here, will that clip in? You can hear this one, if we turn on, is a bit crunchy. It's in the low volume. Let's turn to radio. It's not quite right. Wriggle this around and scrub the potentiometer out. You might get better audio again. Much better audio. So that's the first little fix I had to do with these ones. The next little fix is I had to clean battery terminals. Battery terminals are easy as give it a bit of contact cleaner and a bit of a scrub with either a rag or a toothbrush or something like that. Don't forget these top two here. They're on the top of the battery there. And you probably don't need to really give them a scrub, just a quick squirt and let it dry off. Alright, after a quick squirt, let's try a camo battery again. Camo battery works. Nice clear audio when you turn it on. Alright, let's try our other one. That one should go in firmly. This one's got no audio at all. Now, the audio problem, when you get this is a problem I found some years ago. I found with these that it's usually just the switch. So you can hear it on that. There's a switch in here on the socket that determines whether it switches back again. And sometimes it's just the switch in that socket that goes. You can open them up and replace that. That's not the end of the world. Now, the primary reason I started this video is I've got a job to do. And I wanted to use channel 40 UHF and I wanted to use the hand mic, which I've got my base station going up the top here, but you can see when you push this, it doesn't always transmit. Sometimes you've got to squeeze it really hard or in the right place to sometimes make it transmit. So I think the tactile button in this is a bit knackered. This is only a cheapie, so we're going to open it with the 3 screws and see what's going on inside. Now, before we get too far into this, the charging bases for these take 10 volt DC. I once upon a time used to modify these to take 12 volts. And some people went, oh, you just changed the plug and put a 12 volt one on there. No, they actually don't like taking 12 volts, they blow up. What I actually did was put a 7810 linear regulator in here which fits in and take away the 10 volt plug and just give them a 12 volt lighter socket plug in there. But a lot of people thought I was ripping them off when I did that and didn't know the modification, so I had to actually open the back of the charger and let them know. This is a spare one with a bent pin. We've got multiple of these as well. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of prep here.
Hello.
A lot of people don't know
Yo.
what this stuff is. This is
Howdy.
Yeah.
It's a product made
Hi.
of plastic.
You went out? You went out or somewhere? Oh.
No, not yet, at least.
Ah, okay. Just wondering. Just wondering.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of how this looks because I'm just like it's showing this weird pattern here. Not exactly a blender expert, but
Like I want to get into Blender, but it's just like too much for me. Like I understand how to
yeah.
like like making it like using the what's it called
Mhm.
um extract and all that because it kind of reminds me of the days I use Google SketchUp, and it's like, but everything else seems so fucking complicated to me because especially whenever I try to do sculpting, it's just like I just didn't like the whenever every time the thing when like doing the pinch using the pinch tool or brush whatever, and it's like when you pinch too much of it, it becomes sharp. I don't know how to like fix that, even when like and keep in mind my undo is like very limited, like 5.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's that.
Let me face it. I'm willing to read it all the time. Enough. Alright, how do I get this to?
BLUTAC, Blue Tack, and it's usable like a reusable adhesive. Really handy. It's a lot stronger than like
Down to
plasticine
0.
or
Hold on,
Play-Doh
put it
or
back.
whatever you might be thinking, or silly putty. But it does work really well for a lot of this sort of stuff. Let's see if we can get this open. Lift this up gently. There we go. Right, now we can take our lever off, or our button unit that needs to come out gently. I suspect the rubber membrane in here is degraded somewhat. Yes, the rubber membrane I think is just degraded massively. So we might actually just extract that completely and see if we can make it function without that. That's a little stopper there, and there's a rubber bit stuck in there. Let me see if I can clean that out. Right, there'd been some rubber had adhered to that. Let's zoom in a bit. So this is our bit, that little nub in the middle there, that is what contacts the tactile switch. Tactile switch being this piece right in here, and this is our rubber bit here, which is like sticky and solid all at the same time. So this may end up being actually just a really simple fix. And just popping this back in with that rubber piece removed. I don't know if it will make contact. It probably won't. I'm not too worried about this being waterproof or not. This is my external mic. So that won't make contact. But what I think I have is some other tactile switches with a longer stop on the top. I could just put a piece of plastic in there too. That might be easier. Let me have a look. Now, littered through the bottom of my laser cutter is a whole bunch of little offcuts of little circular shaped things in various different sizes, some very tiny. This is a piece of acrylic. I think that'd probably almost fit that gap nicely. It might actually just sit in there. If I do that right, put that in here. Okay, so it looks like, let's have a closer look at that tactile switch. I have to apologise if there's a bit of background noise. My neighbours have decided to mulch a tree. So I think the bit that actually came out and stuck in here, I think that's actually the shaft out of the tactile switch there. Or at least, if that is, that's meant to go in that hole. So I think we are definitely going to have to replace that tactile switch. So let me find my spares. Alright, we have the board out here and we can see that it's a right angle type tactile switch. I'm not sure I'll have a spare one of those, but I'll have a look around. Alright, I found some spare parts, including a bunch of tactile switches in varying lengths, including some massively long ones. However, none of these are the 90-degree type. I even have some giant ones in here. You know what, I could actually just replace it with a button like this. That might actually be possible. I'll look at how the housing works. But yeah, worst case, I may have to retrofit one of these and like glue it in sideways. Somebody's on channel 40 apparently. Right, I've given this some thought, and I think this guy's going to go. I'm not going to bother mounting one in at 90 degrees. It's going to be somewhat more of a pain in the rear. Although I have some with legs, actually now I think about it, I have some with legs I can hang around the side. You know what, I might chop this off. I'll try one side mounted, otherwise I'm going to put that on. Alright, now what we're going to do here, we're going to tin the legs on a tactile switch here. If I can do that in frame, it'll be all the better. Tin a couple of legs here, which just put a bit of solder on them. Alright, now we're going to try and hang this off the board this way. Try not to bridge the pins together. Probably not my proudest solder job, but that allows us to bend that, and then if we do it right, we can put a bit of hot glue behind it, and that might work. Alright, hot glue mod done, and it clips in alright. So we're going to dodge this up because, you know, it's got to work for like 2 days. That's all we've got to have it work for. And if we were to put the shells back together, I can easily grab that with my thumb and push the button. We'll keep this and we'll get the correct switch at a later date and fix it properly. But for now, that'll work for a couple of days. Okay, let's try now. Okay, it works. And let's go to channel 40 here. Test 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3. Okay, it works pretty well. Alright, and we can like that. We're good with radio. Problem with these things is they're not real good at standing up. Let's find somewhere that's not in my Wi-Fi range. Right, actually we'll probably get a copyright strike from that. We won't do that for too long. Anyway, we have a working radio. There's one other thing I want to test. On the little cheap ones here on the base, there is a little headphone plug here. I'm going to plug that into something a little special. In an ordinary world, I could just run an adapter, plug this lead in and plug it straight into that. But I want to have this clipped onto my belt while I'm riding in my 8-wheel drive, and which is noisy, so I want to block out some noise. I want to hear what's going on here, but be able to pick up this and talk. So let's see if that works. Right, so it comes through one ear only, but it does work. Alright, now can I talk through the headset with this? Let's go back to that. Testing 1, 2, 3. Alright, looks like it works. We're doing well. Alright, we're set up for a nice little thumbnail here. I always like to
it whether to transmit or not transmit. And if you're not transmitting that tone, it will not turn on, which then retransmits out. This is a way that we prevent repeaters from erroneously transmitting errant, unrelated information. So it's only when you transmit in at the appropriate frequency that it transmits out to everybody that's listening on all these other radios. So how do we do that? So every one of these radios has a CTCS transmit function, and this Baofeng is pretty easy to get to. If you go to Menu, Item 13, Transmit for T, CTCS, and if you go into that, you can then provide some kind of a sub-audible hertz or some audible sound that this will transmit on specified information. And if you want to know what the repeater over here is listening for, you have to use something like repeaterbook.com or a number of other resources that tell you what that frequency is. And then once you have that and you have the offset set, you can save the memory channel. And that is what adds to the memory channel, that when you click VFO or memory mode, it's switching between them. Now the good news is that every one of these radios functions with this exact same concept. So imagine you have this Kenwood, which by the way is pretty much discontinued right now, but you can still find them used. Let's say someone said, hey, my repeater is on this frequency, 147.160, which is not necessarily what it would be. You need to set the offset and you need to set a tone. Keep in mind, this is a bit different than the Baofeng, but watch how easier this is, even though this is very complex. So watch this, hit the tone button. T is now enabled, and if I hit F and then tone again, T cell is the item that's displayed. And I gotta zoom really in because these buttons are kind of small here. But check this out, if I hit F and tone again, now there's my sub-audible tone select, and I can use the dial to change this up or down. So let's say it's 136. Good. Okay, we're gonna hit it again. So now I'm transmitting on that tone, because that T is inactive. So what if I need to now set my frequency shift? So same problem, I hit F, and then shift is a button right there. Oh, a plus showed up. What if I do that again for minus? Now it's minus, and so watch what happens when I transmit. It's shifting down. So now that we have a repeater pretty much lined up here, so we have a frequency set, we have tone selected, and we have an offset, which is shifting it up versus down. Now we need to set it to a memory location, and we're going to save it off as repeater. So if we hit the F button, so it says 2, that's the current most active loaded repeater. 3 is a blank channel, and if I hit M.in, it's now saved. So we're in VFO mode. Let's change it to MR. And on 3, there's our repeater that we programmed. So let's get back to 146.520. So I'll hit enter. 146.520. That is our national simplex calling frequency, but I don't want tone on there, so I'll turn that all the way off. It's gone. I'll hit F, and I want that. No, I don't want it on 3 or 4. I want it on my 0 station, so I'll memory in. And I don't want that low power either, so I take that back. Let's go to low, high. We want high for simplex in most cases. That's the way I like to use it. I'll lower the power if I need to change it. But so now we'll hit F again. We'll go down to 0, and we'll hit M in. So now we're on VFO. Let's go to MR, memory. There's our frequency. 146.520, all set. Notice how that is completely different battery of arms than the Baofeng. Totally different. In fact, it's like, I think the Kenwood's actually a lot easier because it's all on the screen. You don't have to go into a menu system like you do with the Baofeng. You just go in by hitting the F button and then whatever it is as printed on the screen. This is a much easier radio to use. So here's another handy feature that a lot of radios have deployed in different ways. So if you take this FX6, it has a button on the side here. If you click it, called the monitor. It allows you to hear signals that are way below the squelch level. And so squelch, very important. I'm going to use this as an example because the Kenwood makes it really easy. If I hit SQL, this isn't SQL, but if I hit SQL, I can set the squelch down to 0. That means it's just passing everything through. But if I click it on one level, now the squelch is taking that noise floor and it's silencing the radio, and only things that break above the noise floor are getting through. Squelch is really handy, but sometimes you want to just hear what's out there, and so you can hold the monitor button and you can hear it. Radios like the Quansheng actually are kind of like the Yaesu. You button on the side, and now you're hearing the monitor, which is really handy. The Baofeng doesn't really work that way. You have to... That's a flashlight if you don't hold it down, but if you hold it down, now you hear the monitor as well. So keep that in mind, they don't all work the same. Now, something that is my favorite feature that most of these radios don't have is monitoring the reverse frequency. So let's say on our repeater, our make-believe repeater we made here, which is this guy. See this transmit? See how it switches? It goes up by 6 kilohertz. Well, we've got a jammer, and they're transmitting on this repeater. They're transmitting into this frequency. So if I wanted to figure out where they were at, or I wanted to hear if I can hear them on simplex, I want to monitor the input frequency. If you hit the reverse button, now you're listening to the input for that repeater. Not all radios do this. A lot of them have different ways of making it work, but that's a really handy feature to be able to have in your arsenal. Now, for a little bit rarer of radios, what about radios that don't have keypads at all, right? So this is the ICOM ID50, which is a really good radio, and one of my my classic radios here, which is honestly...
Sorry, I'm talking to... I'm
just like
right. I'm chatting to Fire Drive right now, so sorry for the sudden...
This is the Yaesu VX3, which is like a 1-watt transmitter.
Wait.
By the way...
Hang on, guys.
inside the repeater station, but that's the right now. We don't necessarily need high when I'm talking to my bro radios, so I'm going to hit menu, and I'm going to hit one of the up or down arrows to change that to low power, for instance. And I'm going to save it by hitting menu again, and I'm going to get exit to exit out.
Yeah, I'm drinking my black coffee right now.
Still hitting all my friends.
I don't feel like I want to go to sleep. I still got...
Because we're all sitting next to each other, and maybe we're not that far away. But if you're on a repeater or trying to talk to a repeater, it's best to lower the power output to its lowest level and then work your way up until you're able to hit the repeater, particularly using a better antenna, than it is to always be transmitting at high power, particularly if you're outdoors. You want to save that battery. This is your depleting resource, much like water, that you would have to worry about if you're in the field, or you just have an extended amount of time you want this radio.
Hang on, right back, guys.
So save your batteries.
Right back.
Go low power. So now we're going to get in the weeds a little bit when it comes to repeaters, but this is very important to understand what's happening here. So we're going to treat these all as users of the repeater, and we could be separated by tens of miles, if not, 60 miles. And my little war driver here is going to be my repeater. Let's say it's on a mountaintop. When a radio that wants to talk into the repeater transmits into the repeater, it's not going to transmit on the stated frequency that's on the display, however you have that configured using chirp or whatever. It's going to transmit on an offset frequency, and that offset is going to be slightly off of that receive frequency. And the reason for that is that's what the repeater is listening on. You're going to transmit on that offset frequency, often called the input frequency, and that's going to key up this repeater to then transmit on the receive frequency for the radio or the repeater that you're on, and then all of these radios will hear it. The reason we do that is that you have basically simultaneous transmissions, meaning while you're transmitting onto the input of this radio, which is slightly off frequency, it's simultaneously transmitting out on the receive frequency. You don't hear it because this is a single duplex or half duplex radio. Now just think about this for a second. If you had this radio on a mountaintop, and let's say this is a 100-watt radio, and you're transmitting into it at the same frequency, and it's simultaneously transmitting out on the same frequency, chaos would ensue. They'd all be interfering with each other constantly. So you use something with an offset, transmit in, it transmits out and hits all of these other radios while you're talking and you can't hear yourself because you're not full duplex, then you can make contact with everybody. That's how repeaters work, and it's more complicated than that, particularly inside the repeater station, but that's the idea. Now, how do we engage this offset where this radio is going to transmit into the repeater and it's going to transmit out? Well, first we got to get off of whatever that is. So let's go into menu, and under item 25 it says shift. Yeah, that's what that says. SFT stands for shift/D, which is shift direction. So if I go to menu, hit menu again, I get a plus or a minus. If I'm on 70 centimeters, it's going to be a 5 megahertz shift, but if I'm on 2 meters, then it's going to be about 600 kilohertz. Now for repeaters, it doesn't really make it easy on you, so if you go back into menu, and we go up to 25, we said go up, right? But we didn't say how much to go up. We have to set that, so let's lock that in. And we'll go to the offset. Oh, there's no offset here. The offset is blank. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this to 600.
Offset frequency 0, 0, 0, 6, 0, 0. Confirm.
So now when I exit out of here, it's shifting up in frequency. Which if there was a repeater on that location that's listening and it's open, which we'll talk about in a second, it would pick that up and go, oh, somebody's transmitting into me. I need to take that and go ahead and retransmit it. I'm gonna go into this box at that up offset frequency and then transmit out to everybody else at that receive frequency. So what is that other thing? Well, there's more to this, of course. The repeaters don't want to just retransmit everything it hears. And so it usually has something called a CTCSS tone that tells it whether to transmit or not transmit. And if you're not transmitting that tone, it will not turn on, which then retransmits out. This is a way that we prevent repeaters from erroneously transmitting errant, unrelated information. So it's only when you transmit in at the appropriate frequency that it transmits out to everybody that's listening on all these other radios. So how do we do that? So every one of these radios has a CTCS transmit function, and this Baofeng is pretty easy to get to. If you go to menu, item 13, transmit for T, CTCS, and if you go into that, you can then provide some kind of a sub-audible hertz or some audible sound that this will transmit on specified information. And if you want to know what the repeater over here is listening for, you have to use something like repeaterbook.com or a number of other resources that tell you what that frequency is. And then once you have that and you have the offset set, you can save the memory channel. And that is what adds to the memory channel, that when you click VFO or memory mode, it's switching between them. Now the good news is that every one of these radios functions with this exact same concept. So imagine you have this Kenwood, which by the way is pretty much discontinued right now, but you can still find them used. Let's say someone said, hey, my repeater is on this frequency, 147.16180, which is not necessarily what it would be. You need to set the offset and you need to set a tone. Keep in mind, this is a bit different than the Baofeng, but watch how easier this is, even though this is very complex. So watch this, hit the tone button. T is now enabled, and if I hit F and then tone again, T cell is the item that's displayed. And I gotta zoom really in because these buttons are kind of small here. But check this out, if I hit F and tone again, Now there's my sub-audible tone select, and I can use the dial to change this up or down. So let's say it's 136. Good. Okay, we're going to hit it again. So now I'm transmitting on that tone because that T is inactive. So what if I need to now set my frequency shift? So same problem, I hit F, and then shift is a button right there. Oh, the plus showed up. What if I do that again for minus? Now it's minus, and so watch what happens when I transmit. It's shifting down. So now that we have a repeater pretty much lined up here, so we have a frequency set, we have tone selected, and we have an offset, which is shifting it up versus down. Now we need to set it to a memory location, and we're going to save it off as repeater. So if we hit the F button, so it says 2, that's the current most active loaded repeater. 3 is a blank channel, and if I hit M.in, it's now saved. So we're in VFO mode. Let's change it to MR. And on 3, there's our repeater that we programmed. So let's get back to 146.520. So I'll hit enter. 146.520. That is our national simplex calling frequency, but I don't want tone on there. So I'll turn that all the way off. It's gone. I'll hit F, and I want that. No, I don't want it on 3 or 4. I want it on my 0 station, so I'll memory in. And I don't want that low power either, so I take that back. Let's go to low, high. We want high for simplex in most cases. That's the way I like to use it. I'll lower the power if I need to change it. But so now we'll hit F again. We'll go down to 0, and we'll hit M in. So now we're on VFO. Let's go to MR, memory. There's our frequency. 146.520, all set. Notice how that is completely different battery of arms than the Baofeng. Totally different. In fact, it's like, I think the Kenwood's actually a lot easier because it's all on the screen. You don't have to go into a menu system like you do with the Baofeng. You just go in by hitting the F button and then whatever it is as printed on the screen. This is a much easier radio to use. So here's another handy feature that a lot of radios have deployed in different ways. So if you take this FX6, it has a button on the side here. If you click it, it's called the monitor. It allows you to hear signals that are way below the squelch level. And so squelch, very important. I'm going to use this as an example because the Kenwood makes it really easy. If I hit SQL, no, this isn't SQL, but if I hit SQL, I can set the squelch down to 0. That means it's just passing everything through. But if I click it on one level, now the squelch is taking that noise floor and it's silencing the radio, and only things that break above the noise floor are getting through. Squelch is really handy, but sometimes you want to just hear what's out there, and so you can hold the monitor button and you can hear it. Radios like the Quansheng actually are kind of like the Yaesu. You button on the side, and now you're hearing the monitor, which is really handy. The Baofeng doesn't really work that way. You have to... That's a flashlight if you don't hold it down, but if you hold it down, now you hear the monitor as well. So keep that in mind. They don't all work the same. Now, something that is my favorite feature that most of these radios don't have is monitoring the reverse frequency. So let's say on our repeater, our make-believe repeater we made here, which is this guy. See this transmit? See how it switches? It goes up by 6 kilohertz. Well, we've got a jammer, and they're transmitting on this repeater. They're transmitting into this frequency. So if I wanted to figure out where they were at, or I wanted to hear if I can hear them on simplex, I want to monitor the input frequency. If you hit the reverse button, now you are listening to the input for that repeater. Not all radios do this. A lot of them have different ways of making it work, but that's a really handy feature to be able to have in your arsenal. Now, for a little bit rarer of radios, what about radios that don't have keypads at all, right? So this is the ICOM ID50, which is a really good radio, and one of my my classic radios here, which is honestly, you can find a Baofeng that looks just like this. This is the Yaesu VX3, which is like a 1-watt transmitting radio. And by the way, take a look at this screen. So look at the screen printing. Now you have a printed button, a orange word, and then a blue word. Well, how do you do all of those things? Those are all things that are either a press and hold, an F and W, and this, and then there's all kinds of variation that you can run into versus something like the Icon, which is going to have a different approach, right? So let's take a look at some of these. So I'm on US call, and this is also on Simplex. So do they have a memory and VFO mode? Sure, a VM button and an MR button. So if I click that, now I'm looking at the HRO repeater in Anaheim, and if I hit VM, this is just going to take me back to, I think this is VFO. Yeah, it's VFO, right? So this is my US call. It's one of my transmit frequencies. So slightly different, but same concept. And this dial here on the top, well, that's just one click, and it locks. So if I go to US call and I lock it in, now I'm kind of like locked in there. But on the Icom, that's not how it works at all. It has a crown and an outer dial. And so the crown is your volume control, and then the outer dial allows me to change through the frequencies, or in this case, the memory channels that I have loaded. So if I hit HRO, I'm not going to hit it. What about the next one? Nope, none of these repeaters I can hit with my sideways held vertical antenna. Okay, so that's just navigating them. So what if you go back into VFO mode? So for here, 2 buttons. This is a V or megahertz, so I click it. Now I'm at 146420, and I can just scroll this up into, I don't know, one of these. It automatically tries to set an offset for me on the plus side, and if I go to V over here, I'm still in 70 centimeter. Let's match them. So I'm going to go back down to band. I'm going to change the band button. Band is changing the frequency set, so 30 megahertz, 108 megahertz, 146. Okay, pretty close. So I'm going to go up to 147.80. There's a faster way of doing this with some button clicks, but I'm just going with what I see here, make it simple. So there we go, 147, 147, and if I transmit, oh, why isn't it? Oh, there's an offset. Oh, and there's an offset here too, because it thinks it's a repeater. Interesting. So it's like they both know to plus up the offset, and we can change that if we want to, the minus to go down. So how do we set a tone in this case? Because we would want to likely have a tone if we were on a repeater. Now, so if I have tone selected and I don't know what sub-audible kilohertz I'm transmitting on, it's actually kind of easy to do this on the Icom. I hit quick and I go to TS for tone select, and then I can change this to whatever I want to match the repeater. So let's say 200 kilohertz. So now I have a plus transmit, I have a tone selected, and I want to load it into memory. On some of those other radios, there's going to be a different battery of arms to do that. In this case, though, you just hold the MW button down. So if I hit MR, that's all of our memories we have. If I hit VFO, that's now my VFO frequency. But if I go back and I hold down MW, hold it down, that's the selection. So now it's going to ask me, write a new channel, write to a selected channel, or manage my memory. So let's just make it simple. We're going to go to write new channel and hit the jewel button. And so it's going to say channel 65. I don't want that. I'm going to change it to 60, 70. Let's do that. And I hit OK. Write to a blank channel. Yeah, go ahead. There you go. It's done. So now when I get out of here, I'm back in memory. Let's change this. Fine. If I go back to memory mode, now if I go down to the end, there's our new repeater that we've loaded into it on channel 70. That's all there is to it. So what if you have an incredibly complex radio like this Kenwood D75? Yeah, there's a lot of features that are baked into this, but it's not so far off from its older brother in the sense that, look at this keypad. It's pretty similar. In fact, they share some similar buttons. It's changed over time with adding more in the D-pad, and now the enter button, which was down here before, is now here, so I can just type in whatever I want. Right, and now I'm transmitting there. The idea, though, is that you have the same or similar context from radio lines to radio lines, and you have the F button, which gives you this new quick menu, versus you had the F button on the Kenwood that worked a little bit different based off the keypad. And you can go deeper by going into the menu, which gives you more options that way. But the base rule set is pretty much the same. A lot of this video is really trying to empower you to get some kind of an anchor point that you can base things off of, because all these radios function a little bit differently, and they will have similar characteristics of other radios that don't necessarily match with other ones, but then you have, you know, an oddball one that's going for size versus capabilities of like the Kenwoods that may vary a lot. And that's the point, is that, you know, the takeaway here is that these all vary a little bit, but it's not too unapproachable because the same standard rules apply. I need to set a frequency for whatever I'm going to do. I need to set an offset if I'm going to do a repeater, and I need to have a sub-audible tone for them to be able to talk to the repeater and be able to activate it. And then if I like that repeater and I want to be more engaged with it, I might want to commit it to memory, and they all have a slightly different way of doing it. The good news is that all of this is generally documented pretty well, and if the manual is not satisfying to you, maybe written in a way that you don't jive with it, then you can look up YouTube videos that cover these in greater detail, or you can pull up many websites that cover these to greater extent. So that's the idea, is, you know, just keep an open mind with a lot of these radios. Just know going in that they're all going to work a little bit different, and you may need some kind of a way to be able to remind yourself what that is. For me, you know, I have a notepad that I keep with me all the time, and I like to make notes on things, particularly if I have a continued problem. I want to make a note and possibly laminate a piece of paper that I keep with the radio for things that make me get tripped up when I'm trying to use the radio and how I want to function with it. There is a much deeper rabbit hole that, you know, different radios can go into when we start talking about the accessory ports. By the way, Kenwoods and Baofengs pretty much have the same audio accessory ports here. Even the Quancheng shares that, and some of them have USB-C and some of them don't. They're DC only, but you know, that's what makes your radios unique, is that they're going to be a little bit different across the board, but they will have similarities that you can tie off of to be able to use them in conjunction with each other.
So the only way videos like these can get better is if you take the time to take my tips, try them out, and then you tell me how'd I do. Or if you are experienced with handhelds, what would you have added? Because I'm going to use this as a series that we are going to deploy for things like D-Star radios, Yaesu System Fusion radios, mobile radios like in your car, and of course, high frequency radios, the radios that I like the most, obviously, right? So we'll talk about portable Go Box radios, preparedness-minded radios, bug-out radios, all of that in a practical sense to just give you the tools you need to get up and running. And then you can use my other videos, now well over 1,000, that go deeper into different aspects of things. Want to do JSA call? I got a video for that. Want to do WinLink? I got that too. There's a link in the description to my playlist, which you can find if you're interested in Are You New to Radio? Start here. Click on it, and any one of those things is going to help you get that deeper context to go along with that baseline that we set today. Love to hear your feedback. I mean that truly. I'm Josh KI6NAZ. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. 73.
6 Delta Alpha Yankee, or more accurately, WRTI 407, which is my GMRS call sign. I'm using that because today we're going to be taking a quick look at the Baofeng UV9G UV9 Golf. This is the radio that I mentioned in the last video I did on GMRS, and it was the first thing I did after paying for my GMRS ticket on the FCC website. I went to Amazon and purchased one of these. And I did so for a couple of important reasons. One, it's already kind of a well-regarded entry-level GMRS type radio. But secondarily, I have some experience with some of its siblings, specifically the Baofeng GT3WP and the Baofeng UV9R. They all share a common resemblance, although two of them are identical twins. One looks a little bit different, but they're all kind of the same radio. They're all IP67 radios. They share the same battery. They share a lot of the same features. Although, of course, the UV9G differs in a big way in regards to its programming, and we'll get into that later. But I should also mention at this point, while I do have this radio, I also have a couple of Wushan radios, or Wuxin, or Ocean, or however the heck that's pronounced. Maybe somebody can inform me on that in the comments section. But I have a KG935 Golf on the way, which is purportedly a pretty good GMRS radio. And then for the amateur radio guys, I've got the KG UV9 Papa. And I'm going to be doing reviews on both of those radios fairly soon, at least as soon as they come in. And of course, Spectre Gear will be manufacturing pouches for those. But I'm kind of excited about those radios because I've never messed around with that brand at all. So I'm kind of curious as to how they do. Hopefully it does pretty well. Back to the review at hand, and that, of course, is the Baofeng UV9 Golf. Now, I mentioned its resemblance to the GT3WP and the UV9R. And just as a matter of trivia, and because nobody's mentioned it yet, so it'll give me at least one unique angle on the whole story, I should point out that my initial impression when I heard the nomenclature of UV9G, I thought, like a lot of folks probably thought, that it was just a UV9R that was programmed out for GMRS purposes. In actuality, it's not a UV9R. Although, again, these radios are pretty darn similar. They only differ cosmetically. But for purposes of maybe perhaps someday winning a bar bet, if there is such a thing in amateur radio as an amateur radio bar bet. But just from a pure trivial pursuit standpoint, the UV9G is actually a GT3WP. They are cosmetically absolutely identical. Of course, they differ inside, but I'll point a few of these things out. If you let me tilt these so you get a good look at the front of the radio. If you look at all of the contours, all the angles, all of the case overall, identical in every respect. Of course, the antennas differ. I'll get to that in a moment. But otherwise, the case is, again, perfectly identical. Going to the other side, of course, perfectly identical. And your biggest clue, I suppose, is going to be these the gripping surface grooves. I'll turn it this way, actually. That you see here and here. Those are identical, and of course, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee, or more accurately, WRTI 407, which is my GMRS call sign. I'm using that because today we're going to be taking a quick look at the Baofeng UV9G, or UV9 Golf. This is the radio that I mentioned in the last video I did on GMRS, and it was the first thing I did after paying for my GMRS ticket on the FCC website. I went to Amazon and purchased one of these. And I did so for a couple of important reasons. One, it's already kind of a well-regarded entry-level GMRS type radio. But secondarily, I have some experience with some of its siblings, specifically the Baofeng GT3WP and the Baofeng UV9R. They all share a common resemblance, although two of them are identical twins. One looks a little bit different, but they're all kind of the same radio. They're all IP67 radios. They share the same battery. They share a lot of the same features. Although, of course, the UV9G differs in a big way in regards to its programming, and we'll get into that later. But I should also mention at this point, while I do have this radio, I also have a couple of Wushan radios, or Wuxin, or Ocean, or however the heck that's pronounced. Maybe somebody can inform me on that in the comments section. But I have a KG935 Golf on the way, which is purportedly a pretty good GMRS radio. And then for the amateur radio guys, I've got the KG UV9 Papa. And I'm going to be doing reviews on both of those radios fairly soon, at least as soon as they come in. And of course, Spectre Gear will be manufacturing pouches for those. But I'm kind of excited about those radios because I've never messed around with that brand at all. So I'm kind of curious as to how they do. Hopefully it does pretty well. But back to the review at hand, and that, of course, is the Baofeng UV9 Golf. Now, I mentioned its resemblance to the GT3WP and the UV9R. And just as a matter of trivia, and because nobody's mentioned it yet, so it'll give me at least one unique angle on the old story, I should point out that my initial impression when I heard the nomenclature of UV9G, I thought, like a lot of folks probably thought, that it was just a UV9R that was programmed out for GMRS purposes. In actuality, it's not a UV9R. Although, again, these radios are pretty darn similar. They only differ cosmetically. But for purposes of maybe perhaps someday winning a bar bet, if there is such a thing in amateur radio as an amateur radio bar bet. But just from a pure trivial pursuit standpoint, the UV9G is actually a GT3WP. They are cosmetically absolutely identical. Of course, they differ inside, but I'll point a few of these things out. If you let me tilt these so you get a good look at the front of the radio. If you look at all of the contours, all the angles, all of the case overall, identical in every respect. Of course, the antennas differ. I'll get to that in a moment. But otherwise, the case is, again, perfectly identical. Going to the other side, of course, perfectly identical. And your biggest clue, I suppose, is going to be these the gripping surface grooves. Well, I'll turn it this way, actually. That you see here and here. Those are identical, and of course the switches are all identical. Now let me give you a little bit of a contrast with the UV9R. The UV9R differs quite a bit. The PTT is different. These have PTT molded in here. Here it's molded on the case above that. You have these vertical lines. These buttons here are bigger and shaped differently. And of course, just looking at the front of the radio, you can definitely see that difference. So it's just a minor thing, but I thought I'd point that out. But yeah, it's definitely a GT3WP rather than a UV9R that's been rebadged. So there's that. So let me basically do a tour around the radio, and I'll talk about some of the shared traits that it has with the other two radios, of course. And then towards the end, I'll get to where this radio differs, and that's going to be in terms of its programming. But at the top of the radio, obviously, we've got our on-off and volume control knob, which is nicely shielded on the side here to prevent it from being damaged. We have our orange button, of course, which is for emergency alert, which could be a key feature to have if you're in a situation where you're hoping to get found and you need to make a loud noise, you can hit that and it'll set off an audible alarm that will make one heck of a racket. And of course, because it is a Baofeng,
Ooh.
it has to have a flashlight. That is the law. And the flashlight is controlled by the button on the side at the bottom. So turning it here, one short press gives you a constant. Another short press, well, actually turn that up. A second short press gives you a strobe. And the third short press turns it off entirely. Now, I mentioned the antenna, how that's a little bit different. This is the factory antenna. It's not an aftermarket antenna. And some of you may have seen this type of antenna before. This is actually a counterfeit Nagoya NA701. It's an antenna that I bought a couple of them actually with my first UV5R. It's definitely not a factory Nagoya antenna, but you'll notice the similarities between the two with that base. Now, obviously, this is a dual. You can obviously see we have our little second step here. This is typical of a dual band type antenna. However, this antenna does not have that. So it appears it's a monoband UHF antenna, which would make sense on this radio because the only transmitting you're going to do is going to be in the UHF spectrum. Although that same antenna could receive VHF fairly well, probably not as well as a true 2-meter antenna, but it'll do well enough. And again, it's only going to be received. Usually the problem is not necessarily with reception with a mismatched antenna like that. It's more so on transmit because of SWR issues and other things. So yeah, monoband UHF antenna, that's what it looks like. And I should also note that this radio shares a common problem that the GT3WP and the UV9R both have, and that is the antenna connection sits too low within the chassis. This little built-up area right here prevents most aftermarket antennas from screwing in. They actually won't make the trip. They won't screw in far enough. And that would include, by the way, this antenna right here, which I tried after I got this to see if it would work. I could get it to go in, but it rubbed the sides so much that I was this one, of course, appears to have, because you'll note there's this extra portion right here. And I haven't mic'd it out, but I'm going to guess it's slightly undersized from the antennas. This is basically just an adapter or spacer that fits within that hole that allows you to put this antenna on top. And I did note that I was not able to take these two pieces apart, but I did try all that hard. I didn't really want to damage the process. But it would be interesting if that is the case, because it would allow you to run other aftermarket antennas on this. Just a thought, if I get a firm answer on that, I'll do a follow-up on it. So, getting back to the radio, let's go over more of the controls. Of course, on the side of the radio, we have our push-to-talk, which is like most push-to-talks in this radio series. It's okay. It's just okay. It's not a very positive button. It's got a little bit of play in it, a little wiggle, and it just doesn't feel as positive as some of the radios. You sort of have the impression that if you press it too hard, you can actually break it. At least that's my impression. That's been the same impression with the GT3WP. It's exactly the same switch array. So it works, and it hasn't failed on me, and I haven't heard of me failing, but it just feels a little funky. Moving down to the second button right here below the DTT, short press turns on your FM radio. Another short press turns that off, and of course we talked about the flashlight control being the bottom button. Moving to the front of the radio, the speaker is a 1-watt speaker. It sounds it's a little tinny, but it's got good authority to it. It's not underpowered. It's not too quiet like some radios have been. So I'm overall pleased with that. The display is your familiar typical display for Baofangs. Similar to the UV82 series, these radios, if you want to move from the A to the B band, you simply press the exit button, and that's going to move you from one to the other. You can see the little arrow right there, shuttle up and down. Channel control, obviously we have our up-down arrows. We access our menu with a short press, and we move through the menu as need be. Of course, with this radio, because it's programmed as a GNRS radio, but the extent of the adjustments here are just to be adding tones, for instance, to your DI light panels or your repeaters that you've already set up. And I'll talk about how I have this programmed in just a moment. All of the other common features on the keypad apply to this as well. And I won't really dig too deep into that. That's stuff we're all kind of familiar with. But if you get in a jam, it's pretty easy to figure that out. Moving to the other side here, we have obviously our speaker mic cover. Now this is a contact type speaker mic arrangement. In fact, let me grab a screwdriver real quick, and I'll go ahead and take that off and show you what it looks like underneath. So that's fairly easy. So it takes a flat tip screwdriver, and you just simply undo the screw, get to a certain point, and turn it, and it just pops right off. And as you can see, we have contacts rather than plugs that penetrate into the radio. So again, this can make for a good connection for a weather-resistant radio, and as common, which is, for instance, Motorola radios. Although there is a vast difference in terms of quality between the two, but they're at least making an effort. So, and that's a failing on some IP67 radios, is they'll make the darn thing IP67, then they'll put a K plug for the speaker mic. And of course, once you hook up that speaker mic, effectively, at best, you have an IP54 rain-resistant radio. So let me turn this off, and I'll show you the battery. We have a latch here with an arrow. Just simply point that up, and the battery will come out. And this is the same 1800 milliamp battery that's used in the UV9R and the GT3WP. Now, one thing I'll note here, I don't really see any kind of a seal at all in this battery compartment, and I don't on the other radios as well. And as far as the numbers go in here, it's I wouldn't necessarily say this, but it doesn't give you the information I need in terms of the weather resistance on here. And the weather resistance, to be honest with you, on most of these Chinese radios, although many of them claim to be IP67, that's not often the case, but they are at least weather resistant enough to withstand, for instance, a fall into a puddle. Now, when it comes to weather resistance on this radio, that is one point of controversy because I will point out here from the manual, and maybe something you can gesture this with. So the manual is typical Baofeng. The best job they ever did on a manual was their BFF8 or BFF8HP. That was a really well done manual. This one contains what I think are going to be, or turn out to be, some misprints. For instance, on their let's see here. No, I'm sorry, it's the wrong page. Here we go. Main features. So we have a thing here. I noted right here where it says IP57 certified. Now I don't know what IP57 is. I'm going to have to look that up. But they do claim in their sales literature that it's IP67. So I'm going to put that down to perhaps a misprint. And one other misprint that I note on here is the output power. Maybe that's on that page as well. Yeah, output power, they just show 5 watts and half a watt GMRS. Now, having said that, I have some of these channels programmed to 2 watts.
Yeah, I don't know how I got like this hyperfixation of just like fucking like getting into these like handheld ham radios, amateur radios. I don't know, they're just so cool to me that you can like a lot of these Baofeng types are like cheap as fuck, and then they got all these fucking features. Now, don't get me wrong, they're flawed, yeah, but at the same time, it's like fucking like there's just something cool about them, you know. Like you could use them for survival, and then especially this UV9 series of like Baofeng, Pofeng, whatever. Like there's a bunch of them, and also the rebrands. Yeah, yeah. I got my hands on UV5R recently, and I also had to buy the first upgrade that I had to buy was like getting a Nagoya, what's it called, model NA77 whip antenna, because I keep hearing from reviews and videos that the stock antenna that it comes with is just not very good. I mean, they'll get like frequencies, but they're not, you know, they're not as good as like, you know, they're not how is it? It's like they're just crap, you know. They're not what's it called? They're just not good to like be using. I tried testing this and like the replacement whip antenna, the NA77-1 by Nagoya, and it's like the replacement is much more better. Like, don't bother. Like, I bet, you know, like, even though like this one is like smaller, you know, like the millihertz on the Nagoya replacement for it is like lesser. Like fucking what's it called, the stock antenna is basically like 174 to 400 to 520 megahertz, or is it millihertz? I forgot. Like, meanwhile the fucking Nagoya N771 is like 144 to 430 megahertz or whatever. Yeah, I need to relearn my fucking like terminologies when it comes to this stuff. Like, I need this. I might get a license for it so I can like attempt to like get into like all frequencies with it. Like, I don't know. Like, there's like a lot of stuff. me to do before like I already know how to do the like most of the stuff. I still have like I'm still saving up for like upgrades like um what's it called fixing the knob. The knob is already kind of like fixed because like I already put in like 3 layers of double tape, but it's just not good. It's like I might get an O-ring or like a 3D print the knob to a better one. Oh, I want to get a tactical, maybe I'm not really sure. A tactical push to talk mic speaker, you know, the one that's like square and has like the smooth or curved edges or whatever. Maybe that. I'm definitely getting like an extended 3800 milliamp battery for it, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I can't wait to show you guys that, but maybe later. Yeah, just not now. Maybe, only the people who are like on my Discord and stuff can see, probably already seen it. So that's that. So anyway, let's get back to this.
And I'm going to later do a follow-up video where I do a power output test and see what we actually get with our low, mid, and high power settings, because they're alluding that there's only 2 power settings, but I can find 3 in here. And high power settings, because
I don't know, just like watching these UV9R it makes me want to have that as well. But I don't know, like.
Turn this on, and again, let's go to menu.
Wait, hang on.
Transmit power. Okay, so we go to transmit power, and click down here, and we go through our options. We have low, mid, and high. But again, the specs in the manual just show low and high, because low would be half a watt, mid would be 2 watts, high would be 5 watts. So again, output power test is going to be what I need to look at there. Now, I will get to some of the power settings being hardwired into the program.
I'm going to go back to this a bit.
Now is probably a good time to talk about how I have this thing set up. So as it comes from the factory, you're going to be set up with 22 modifiable GMRS frequencies, and it's also going to have a selection of what's called DIY channels, which are channels that are set up to run on a GMRS repeater, and all you need to do to each of those DIY channels is just put in a set of tones in order to break the squelch on the repeater, and it could either be just a simple 1C TSS tone for open, or it could be a send and receive, what they call tone squelch, which most of them are actually set up that way. Now, I did something a little bit different. And it also comes with NOAA weather channels installed. I, unfortunately, kind of put the cart before the horse. I put this thing on Chirp, and it does, by the way, come with a programming cable, which is a nice touch. I like to see radio companies providing programming cables for their radios. I think it's ridiculous that radio companies will send you a radio that, in some cases, needs to be on a